one of the things that the Barbie movie gets right, according in part to René Descartes and also this extremely dead German philosopher who predates Nietzsche named Hegel, is that most modern men don't actually know who they are without women. Many of the things that men use to define themselves are secretly about women in the background. I'm your host, Charlie. I'm a bioethicist. This is Barbie versus Descartes, German idealism versus Greta Gerwig, aka men always grocery shop alone. Why is that? Aka philosopher absolutely wrecks all alpha males forever and in perpetuity and also always. This is Too Much Nuance, episode 2. Okay. So the claim is that men don't know who they are without women. The first example, everybody wants money, but a lot of men specifically want money so that they can, quote, provide for women and thus have value. Or darker, men want money so that they can exert financial control over women and thus have value. Ugh. You might think that we want money because it makes us feel good as individuals, that we want to feel like we have, as Hegel says, say it with me now, independent self-consciousness. Now, I'm quoting loosely here from what is known as the master-slave dialectic, which needs a better translation. Some people call it the Lord and Bondsman dialectic. I humbly submit that it should be called the alpha-beta dialectic, wherein the alpha realizes that he has no sense of self without being able to dominate betas. That despite thinking he is in charge, he is fundamentally a dependent being who requires constant adoration to exist. A jocktastic football captain with no team. Just a lonely egotist. In the master-slave dialectic and the alpha-beta dialectic, upon realizing that the adoration that he requires is coerced and therefore inauthentic, he has a little 1806 existential crisis. And Hegel suddenly understands what Ken understands at the end of the Barbie movie. I know that was a lot of words, but I promise, once you go watch the video, like let it loop, or go back to the beginning and re-listen to that paragraph, that sentence, you are going to get it. That makes sense to me, guarantee, or you're not money back. It's 1806. Hegel, that's 1806. Hegel, rather, so let's get back to 2023 Barbie land. The claim is this: men do not know who they are without women. The first example is money and that provider myth, because in our current system, we don't really get to have value without constantly proving ourselves, or as Liz Plank calls it, without constant masculinity affirming rituals. For those just listening to the audio, I'm holding up her book, For the Love of Men. As she explains, you can lose your man card, and you got to get your man card back, and having a lot of money is one way to do that. And if you listen to the Manosphere podcasts and you're thinking, like, wait a minute, sometimes women buy into this idea that men don't have value unless they can provide. Yeah. Patriarchy hurts everyone. Like, women can buy into patriarchy. You would know that if you watched the Barbie movie, or if you read Liz Plank's book, For the Love of Men, or if you also read this other book, which is admittedly less fun. It's called Down Girl by Dr. Kate Mann. She incidentally has criticisms of the Barbie movie. I haven't read her third book yet, but you could. For a second example of the claim that men don't know who they are without women, everybody wants power, right? But men often want power specifically so that they can control and dominate women. This can be the seemingly gentle domination, many air quotes on that, of weaponized incompetence, as that darn chat, my friend Laura and colleague makes clear. It can also be much darker and much more violent forms of abuse. The takeaway is that power for men, as patriarchy would have it, is about controlling and dominating others. It's less about having self-worth and more about making others worth less. And if your sense of self, right, fundamentally, if your sense of self is based on putting others down, then you don't have what Hegel calls, say it with me again, independent self-consciousness. For a third example, and with less detail because you're getting it now, right? Lots of people want sex, but a lot of men enjoy sex less than they enjoy the anticipation of being able to brag about it to other men, like, which is gross, right? Some men are so afraid of being perceived as gay, but they fail to notice all the other men that they have invited into the bedroom in their minds. And this last one might get me demonetized, but even being able to make women climax is sometimes less about pleasure and mutual reciprocity and more about, in patriarchy, another notch on the belt. Put all these together, money, power, sex, and you start to see that many modern men don't know who they are without relationships of domination to women and relationship to patriarchy, specifically the desire to subjugate women, also known as patriarchy. That was a lot of words. Let's put it in terms that the internet understands. Philosopher destroys alphas everywhere. I call this the alpha. Every alpha is secretly a beta proof. In every proof, you need to define some terms. So, definition A, alpha, is defined as independent, doesn't need anyone else to exist, whereas the beta is defined as dependent on others. Definition A. Definition B, an alpha is defined as another, they're not uncommon, right? You hear these on the internet. Definition B is that an alpha is defined as someone who is in control of women, whereas a beta is defined as someone who is controlled by women. So let's think. Let's just think. Put on our thinking caps. If you, at definition A, if you have to loudly and with muscles prove your independence to others, I got news for you. You are not actually independent. Let me say that again. If you feel the need to constantly prove your independence to other people, you are not actually independent. You secretly need them to even have a sense of who you are. But I have more news, which is it's really only a secret to you. Like, we know. Barbie knows. The harder you flex, the more everyone can see your emotional weakness, your abject lack of self-confidence, of a self-concept outside of your truck nuts. Therefore, if you try to be, quote, alpha, you literally always have a dependent consciousness, a quote, beta consciousness by our definition A that we defined above. But maybe you're like, that actually makes sense. What I need to do is be so alpha that I'm just infinitely confident and secure in my alphaness. Maybe. But a lemma in this little proof might be this. A lemma is just like a little tiny subproof within a proof. If you were that secure, you would not feel threatened by a movie about dolls. That's where credit is due. That's like paraphrasing an insight from Liz Plank, one of her Instagram posts in reaction to the Barbie movie, the author of this book before that, for the Love of Men. Instagram channel's great. Check it out. So, backing it up, by definition A, the concept of alpha is self-defeating. Now, suppose that's not compelling to you. Definition B instead. Defined again as control of women versus being controlled by women. Wrap it back to Hegel. If your entire sense of self is based on whether or not you control women or are controlled by women, your entire sense of self is literally based on women. You have no identity outside of women. Bro, do you even lift? Bro, do you even know who you are? And like, this is where I have to break character as like a funny-ish, nerdy for sure, internet guy to say that I actually don't want to destroy alphas. I do not want you to destroy yourselves. A lot of men do when they can't measure up to what patriarchy demands. Liz has I can't call her Liz, don't know her that well. Liz Plank has a chapter in her book called If Patriarchy is So Great, Why Is It Making You Die? The men destroy themselves. That's a euphemism that TikTok allows me to say out loud. But I want to communicate with this, that like I have been in the place of realizing that I had no self outside of my relationship of control over others, that I wasn't enough on my own, that it wasn't enough for me to just be smart. I had to prove that I was smarter than. When women in my life achieved success that I wanted, I didn't even really feel jealous so much as emasculated. Which is another way of saying I was feeling the tension of recognizing that my self-concept was based on a relationship of domination. And not only did I have a fundamentally dependent self-consciousness in that moment, a kind of gender-driven metaphysical codependence, but I started learning slowly that even when I could get there, being on the top was lonely. Needing to stand on other people isn't the same thing as standing on solid ground. I learned that from a woman in my life who encouraged me to see that I was more than her needing me. And that was hard. Everybody says do the work. Nobody tells you how hard the work is. It is worth it, though. Not just for the people that you won't hurt, but also for you. I wanted to end this section with something punchy, right? Something memorable. I had a version of this where I explained that the first time I read Hegel, I cried. And, which is true. And then I had this whole bit where I was like, LOL, nerd cried, reading a dumb book. And I was going to like come back against this caricature of a person that I crafted in my head being like, yeah, sure, I cried, but like nerds rule the world now. Women don't want gym bros anymore. They want nerds who go to therapy. And I was going to be real self-satisfied, like punching down like that in this imagined conversation, this imagined takedown of a non-existent person. But I fell right into definition B, literally in a podcast about it, right? I fell right in. Deriving my sense of value exclusively from the perceived adoration of women. Intellectual dominance can be just as harmful as physical dominance. It took years, honestly, to recognize that even though flexing intellect is in fashion, it can be just as toxic. Needing to be smarter than someone, needing even to be more emotionally intelligent than someone, is its own form of toxic, dependent self-consciousness. Philosophy professors assault women too. All this is to say, I'm still learning this. The fact that I understand some of the influence of patriarchy on my dependent, nascent, independent self-consciousness doesn't mean I'm always free of it. After the ad break, the title, Barbie versus Descartes. My notes say, be goofy improv in the ad break. This podcast is brought to you by HelloFresh and Blue Apron and NordVPN, and also, I don't have any sponsors yet. I have started to get sponsors on my TikTok channel, hooray. If you would like to support my channel, you can buy any of these books that I mentioned in my reading list, which is linked everywhere, and you can also subscribe, share, like, draw all these things. I also have a Patreon page, which is the best way to support right now. You can join for as low as $1 a month. You can subscribe on Instagram too, if that's your thing. That's there also. It's another option. Cool. So, the main event. Barbie versus Descartes. You read the title. In Descartes' second meditation, and his first most famous saying, we read, I think, therefore I am. If you don't know the context of this quote, it's 1641. It's actually hundreds of years before Hegel, who we were just talking about. It's France. There's wigs. Everybody writes in Latin. Descartes is doubting everything. He's doubting everything he was ever taught, and he realizes that he can doubt a lot of things. With the raw power of his reason, he can skeptically doubt things around him that everyone takes for granted. And like sidebar, Descartes is what's called a rationalist in the biz, right? Brains, logic, thought. So many men with podcast mics pride themselves on being rational. how weak, how anemic your reason must be if your self-concept prevents you from even questioning the precepts of patriarchy. I would go so far as to say you are not a rational person if you cannot entertain the concept that men and women might have equal rights and an equal claim to autonomy and the solitude of self. What a one-liner. Clip it, put it in a short, slap it in IG, back to Descartes. He's meditating. Descartes is meditating. He's doubting everything. He doubts whether he can trust his senses. He doubts whether he has a body. He legit writes the plot of the movie The Matrix in 1641. Look it up. He wants something real to hold on to. And lacking some solid ground to stand on, he starts to despair. And I mean, truthfully, he's probably crying on camera for the retweets. It's pretty hard to go viral in the 1600s. The printing press was itself hot off the press. Rhetorical devices are fine. We can forgive them. We need them. So he's despairing. He doesn't know whether he's in the Matrix. He doesn't have any firm ground to stand on, but he realizes something that you've heard, right? Even if he isn't sure of anything else, he is sure that he is there. You know the line. E equals MC, Columbus genocide, the ocean blue, I think, therefore I am. Everybody knows this. He succeeded. He did it. He went viral. Good job. What does it mean? Descartes is not an existentialist, right? That would not be invented for another 200 years, but he had an existential realization, or we can project that onto him in the past, or we, at least Ken has an existential realization in the Barbie movie, right? Even in the depths of uncertainty and despair, I still exist. Somehow I am here. Life can throw pain at me. Life can take people from me. I can have my self-concept shattered to apparetic bits, and I have. But somehow, I'm still here. Greta Gerwig and Barbie's Ken hasn't read Hegel. He hasn't read Descartes. But he realizes something of deep importance, which is that he can change his relationship to Barbie and to patriarchy and still exist. And to bring it back home to Hegel, in realizing this, painful though it may be, he suddenly understands that he's not actually dependent on her. He's not actually dependent on her coerced adoration for his sense of self. He doesn't need the approval of the other Kens. He doesn't need the approval of other Barbies. Even though he is a plastic incarnation of a socially constructed concept of masculinity, he can change his relationship to patriarchy and still exist. So can we, babe. I mean, bro. Sorry, I know you don't like it when I call you babe, but to put it as pretentiously as possible, your individual being, your mind, has more ontological heft than our collective mutable concepts of masculinity and femininity. Put differently, this proves, if we are to believe Descartes, who you are as an individual consciousness transcends your gender. How awesome. What a gift that you can be like Ken. That your whole world can fall apart and that you can still be there. That there is some kernel of selfhood, some ember of, say it with me, independent self-consciousness that you can kindle and stoke and tend and maybe even love and care for. This is glib, but there is actually a kernel of Mr. Rogers consciousness in every gym bro. I believe that. Barring antisocial personality disorder, sociopathy or whatever. Now, but truly, I wouldn't be trying. I wouldn't be trying if I didn't think that we could do better. So before our final ad break, maybe you're like, look, guy, you say we can apply Descartes to prove the consciousness transcends gender. So you're like, cool. I just disagree with Descartes. I reject rationalism. I think my body matters. Like, that's why I have the truck nuts. Cool. It's legit to critique Descartes, right? His ideas are 500 years old. I am not a rationalist also. Right? I also think your body matters. If that confuses you, you can read Fatal Invention by Dorothy Roberts. If you're listening in audio, this is grabbing her book, Fatal Invention by Dorothy Roberts. One of the best. She is much more experienced than I am. She knows more about bioethics, and she's written extensively about the social construction of race. Specifically, she is a black woman in America. She knows that the kind of body that you're in matters a lot to your opportunities and specifically your health outcomes. And like for the easy payment of 000, 3 easy payments of 000, you can listen to my previous episode of literally this podcast, Too Much Nuance, where I talk about it. Social construction of race. That's episode 1. Truthfully, it's not as good as this one. I know it's not a very good plug, but like the conclusion of the last section is how everybody's always learning, and so am I. So ad break. We'll skip the ad break. You already know that they're fake, and I'm already done plugging myself anyway. So let's power through. We're almost done. Conclusions. If there is one criticism of the Barbie movie from the small army of manosphere podcasters that is worth engaging with, kind of, it is this. Ken looks like a dunce. These men all look like dunces. Try to make my best Tucker Carlson face. I failed. Yeah. They do. We do. Have you talked to women recently? We collectively look like dunces right now. Like we've talked 1641, we've talked 1807. It's 2023, babe. Women are embracing empowerment, questioning femininity, and evolving. What are men doing? Truly, what are we doing? Femininity is being redefined, and bros won't even go to the grocery store together. Masculinity, I just made a Tucker Carlson face. I just realized. Sorry. Masculinity is doing what? Right? Stagnant, seemingly, straining, thinking. If it can only push its head far enough into the sands of time, they will stop. They will not. They will not. We have a software. We need a software update for ManOS 2023. We're running on Windows Vista. While Barbie's writing code for the lunar lander, we're trying to copy her homework, and we can't. We cannot. We literally cannot. By Hegel's definition of the alpha-beta dialectic, it cannot be Barbie's job to redefine Ken. Has to be up to him. Ken can't claim independent self-consciousness and say, okay, I realized my whole identity was based on you needing me, but now could you just do me a favor and tell me who I am? No. It's a contradiction in terms. You got to do it yourself. Your ex never gives you the closure you need. You're broken up. Stop flexing. Start reflecting. I've been talking for too long. We got to go. We've had our little proof, right? Anyone who aspires to be an alpha is like intrinsically a beta. You have no real masculine identity if your sense of self is based on the subjugation of others. Here's another one for your consideration. Less a proof, less a lemma, and more just like a rule of thumb to sift through all the noise. Anyone who is trying to tell you what real masculinity is probably doesn't know who they are. You can use a red cabbage juice as an acid base indicator. You can use this too. Do you know who you are? Do you know who you want to be? Outside of the subjugation of others you have been taught you deserve because of your truck nuts. Our anti-rationalist attachment to patriarchy has made us all into plastic facsimiles of personhood, unindividuated carbon copies of each other. Not carbon, plastic. Like pre-enlightenment Ken. Not yet a real boy. On the way, though. Whenever you're ready. Conclusion. Insofar as they parrot each other, these manosphere podcasters do not really think. Therefore, they do not really am. They are men who do not know who they are without women, claiming somehow, preposterously, that they are the realest ones meant to be in charge. They lack fundamentally, one last time, independent self-consciousness. They have no solitude of self, only the empty promises of the alpha. Watch that sentence, go back, re-listen to that sentence at the beginning, see if you get it now and you get to feel good about yourself. Obligatory content creator reminder to share, subscribe, follow, tweet, X, thread, reel, and reading list links in the bio. The best way to support is on Patreon at patreon.com/thatmakessensetome, as low as $1 a month. This is That Makes Sense to Me. Oh, I had typos. This is not that. That's the title of the Roll it back. Run it again. Obligatory influencer reminder. Watch the sentence at the beginning and see if you get it now. Like, share, subscribe, follow, tweet, X, thread, reel, short, and reading list in the bio. The best way to support is on patreon.com/thatmakessense, as low as $1 a month. This is the Too Much Nuance podcast. I'm Charlie with That Makes Sense to Me. It's okay to have nuts, just maybe not on a truck. Happy reading.